The prayer from Mr. Bolden.
Father in heaven, we love you, and as we gather to carry out the task that you have given us in order to fulfill our purpose, I pray that you intervene in this meeting. Let it work for our good and for the good of our beloved city. Father, we thank you for our mayor, the city council, leaders at every level in the city. Give them grace to bring truth, justice, and stability to our city. Give them power to do what is right and to rule in fairness. May our community be known for justice. May your peace be in our hearts, your grace be in our words, your love be in our hands, and your joy in our souls. As I remind the city council and the leadership of this city that the primary role of leaders is to serve, and the primary goal is for the sake of the people they serve. I pray that what we do here tonight be pleasing in your name. Amen.
Amen. I'll call the meeting to order. If you'll rise for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We will begin with open forum, and we do have one individual who has signed up to speak, and that's Mr. Burrell.
Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Burrell. I'm a lifelong resident of Nacogdoches, Texas, and Nacogdoches County. I've moved in and out and been back here for my home. The reason why I'm coming to the board this afternoon is that there is a perception that the fire station on the intersection of Martin Luther King Boulevard and East Main will either be destroyed, repaired, or torn down completely and moved to another location. Well, a lot of the residents of that particular part of town have lived there for a number of years. There are churches, there are businesses, and there are elderly personnel that live there. So therefore, we would not like to see that fire station moved from its current location. We would like to see the city, well, I'm speaking for myself personally, we would like to see for the city to either improve the fire station or build a new one and not tear it down with the idea of building another fire station in another part of town, because those residents need that fire protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrell. Okay, next on the agenda is the consent agenda, and I would ask the council, are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda? And just one there. Everybody good with that? All right.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we will move on to 6A, and I am going to recuse myself on this item.
We'll need someone to introduce the item.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. We are now on regular agenda item 6A, public hearing, considering a request to amend and/or revoke the specific use permit pursuant to section 118-174 of the Code of Ordinance for a garden shop and plant sale, display, or greenhouse.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, or Pro Tem. This is an item that was initially approved in 2020 when this property was granted approval of a specific use permit to operate a plant nursery at this location. In authorizing a specific use permit, City Council may impose additional conditions. conditions if necessary to protect the public interest and welfare of the community. If one or more of the conditions that have been imposed by council have not been met or have been violated, the city council may then revoke or modify the terms of the specific use permit, which is why we're here this evening. City staff has initiated the proceedings to amend the specific use permit in order to address the drainage issues in the area. The staff has been exacerbated by the development due to the violations of the conditions in terms of the specific use permit. So we'll get right into the weeds. The property is zoned local business and backs up to Colonial Hill subdivision, which is a single-family subdivision. A property to the north is also zoned local business and is developed as a beauty parlor, and then property immediately to the west that is zoned local business is vacant. This is a photo of the property pre-construction. This is the site of another plant nursery that was actually approved in 2004 and operated here for a number of years, but then became vacant. And again, this property backs up to Colonial Hill subdivision, and the elevation between this property and the property to the west is actually quite significant. The property sits on top of a hill, and then the Colonial Hill subdivision does fall as it traverses to the west. It's about a 6 to 8 foot drop between the subject property and that home that's right next door. And so there are already kind of some natural drainage issues just with the topography of the property. And so when this item came forward to City Council in 2020, it included plans to utilize some of that existing improvements. So utilize the existing driveway, the parking, and then preserve a number of those large mature trees that are on the property. At that time, several neighbors came and addressed the council and expressed their concerns about some of those existing drainage issues. And City Council acknowledged those, but wanted to make sure that this development didn't increase those drainage issues or have an additional impact based on the improvements that were proposed. So there was a condition, an additional condition that was placed on the property, that the property owner would submit a plan to control sediment runoff, and that would be submitted to the engineer, to the city engineer, and approved. So after the specific use permit was approved, the applicant did submit construction plans, and then based on those construction plans, the city engineer approved the plan, again, based on what was shown what was shown. So buildings, additional pavement, parking, things of that nature, to make sure that it did comply with the control sediment runoff that was proposed as part of the project. The following year, staff started to receive some complaints from the neighbors about some additional drainage in the area. So we went out and conducted a few site visits, and that's when we did notice that there was some additional impervious area than what was shown on the approved plans, and those are the areas that are highlighted in the red dashes. Impervious area can be essentially anything that's not dirt and grass. Buildings, parking, even gravel. And so in this case, there's a significant amount of gravel that's being utilized as a surface area for several of those outdoor display areas. And gravel isn't the same as pavement, and the water can still get through, but it runs through at a different rate. So it's still not the same sort of drainage runoff that you would see if it were just kept natural with dirt and grass. And so this does change the way that the property functions as far as the drainage in a normal rain event. And so we did find that this was caused to have the applicant have their engineer go out and inspect the property and verify that the drainage was still functioning as initially designed. And upon investigation, they found that the additional gravel was causing more impacts than what was accommodated for in the plan. And so with that, and these are just some images to show you some of those gravel areas. With that, we did reach out to the applicant and request that they submit revised plans to address those issues. And the proposals included either removing the gravel altogether so that it reflected kind of the conditions that were included in the plan, or include additional improvements to offset those. And so this is the plan. It was in your packet, but this is an image of the proposed plan. It was developed by our local engineering firm, 215 Consulting, and I'll let them come up here after our staff's presentation and talk to you more about the proposed plan and the types of improvements that are included. But initially, the additional drainage improvements that are proposed for this plan include a new earthen berm, which essentially will collect and redirect the drainage all the way to East Austin Street. The engineer who developed the plan has stated that this essentially provides pre-existing conditions. So this drainage improvement would be something that would reflect the conditions before this, the plant shed nursery was actually constructed. So it is intended to improve the drainage circumstances substantially. And the proposed timeline for completion is 6 months. So the conditions for approval, or even the conditions for amending a specific use permit, are outlined on your screen. And the ones that we wanted to highlight are compatibility and supporting facilities. So compatibility includes ensuring that the development will be compatible and not injurious, or and not injure the use of enjoyment of the property in the immediate area. The criteria also includes ensuring that supporting facilities exist, and that includes roadways, utilities, and drainage. So these were the criteria that were used whenever imposing that condition in 2020, when the specific use permit was granted. And so these are really the key criteria that we're looking at when reviewing an amendment to the specific use permit based on that condition. As part of the process, so the specific use permit process is very similar to the zone change process as far as the notifications, and it's the same as when you're amending a specific use permit. So we did notify all the property owners within 200 feet. We also sent courtesy postcards to property owners within 500 feet, and this just shows those properties that were located within that 200-foot buffer. We did receive several responses from the public. Some of those were from property owners within the 200-foot buffer. Some of them were from property owners within the 500 feet. And then we just received kind of some general public input that we also included in your packet from people that live in the city but not in the area, and were just in general opposition to amending the specific use permit. And so we included all that in your packet, even though not all of those responses were property owners that were living within that notification area. This item was heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 11th, and there was a lot of public input at that meeting. We heard from the adjacent property owners, including Ms. Cox, Ms. Sherman, and Ms. Foltz. They abut the property, and they all came and spoke and addressed the Planning and Zoning Commission. They provided photos to show or demonstrate some of the examples of the sediment control issues that they've been having. They were in support of the proposed plan, along with a 6-month timeline. Of course, the preference is to have it completed sooner than that. But the majority of the input we had was that the proposed plan seemed to address all of the concerns, and that the timeline was generally amenable to the neighbors. And so the Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval for amending the specific use permit with the proposed plan with the 6-month timeline. Now, that was back in July, and of course, we first attempted to bring this item forward in July and then August, but we had issues with making sure that we had a quorum for the council, and so there has been some time since that has passed. And so I'll let the applicant come up and address the council as far as any changes to that timeline that have been made. But with that, I wanted to conclude staff's presentation, because I know there's going to be some public comment, and I wanted to make sure we had time for that and allow for questions from the council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now open for public hearing. And in regards to a request to amend and/or revoke the specific use permit. All those that would like to comment on to amend or revoke the specific use permit, would you come forward, please?
My name is Janet Wyatt Fultz. My address is 3316 Colonial Drive. Say your last name again, Fults. And am I to restate what I said at the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting? Okay. Well, I then and now am addressing the erosion issues, which are incurred on my property and my neighbors from the water and sand runoff, which is continual from the field of Appleby Sand Road and East Austin. Everything that happens in those fields, no matter how seemingly insignificant, has a direct impact on us. Someone from Steve Bartlett's office came in and looked at the situation. I'm about 25 feet below that apex of the plant shed. So it's not just a little 6-foot drop. It's significant. And even if it's mowed too often or too low, completely stripping the ground of grass, as Elena said, the gravel, pallets of rocks, heavy equipment that's parked there, anything you can imagine displaces that sand, and the water takes another path. Mr. Sugart, in good faith, he put up a silt screen when they first came in to help us, and it did. But over the course of time, some of the silt screen became tattered, and just like a 10-foot section was removed. So in the last few months, just since we met here before, I've had to spend $450 with a landscaping company to put some ground cover and deterrents on the other side of the fence, which is not even my property. And in between rains, I've shoveled out about 6 inches of wet sand each time it's rained, just from that little section of silt screen that's been removed. So you could look at the overall and think, well, this doesn't make a difference. Everything makes a difference. Everything that goes on up there, because it's just sand, and it all comes down on us. I have spent to date this year $10,000+ on repairs, enlarging my drainage system, and I've spent less than my neighbors have. And you can imagine if you have a working system in place and something happens, you don't know what's going on, you don't know what somebody's doing, but something can happen that can completely cause you to start all over again. It's disheartening. I even have a sewer manhole on my property. It was dead for decades. But when the plant shed came in, the city had to hook them up, and it was leaking raw sewage in my yard. So that had never happened. My parents had bought the house in 1972. They are both deceased, but I'm living there now. And things that have never happened. Water, 5 inches of standing water, which almost came into the house for the first time in 50 years. And we can't fight it because it's just coming, and it's increasing exponentially as the businesses come and anything that's put up there. In 2009, I had a local engineer, Milton Moore, assess my situation, and he said any change in the use of property behind your home would certainly require a drainage review and plan to protect you and others from surface water damage. No plan was in place when the property was sold to the plant shed. They did not have an engineer's plan in place. A couple of members on the city council wanted to table the vote until they could see the engineer's plan. But they decided instead to go ahead and let them buy the property with the stipulation, and Elena stated this, that they could not worsen the drainage issue. Obviously, it's worsened because that's why we're here now. And it's increasing because in 2020, when they bought the property, I had spent $6,000 on the drainage issue. So in just 2 years' time, that's $4,000 more. So that gives you an idea of how quickly it's happening. As the original nursery in 2004, Sunshine Nursery, it was considered for a daycare center in 2009, and then plant shed in 2020. People from the city would just tell us, once the property sells, it's the new owner's responsibility to do something about the drainage problem, or we could get an attorney and take them to court. I don't want to take anybody to court. They have no idea how it affects us. I wouldn't expect them to know. We didn't even know when they came in how we would be affected. So you just kind of wait and you hope and you do what you can. But we're to the point now, if I were to fix everything and restore it as it was, I just got an estimate for $27,000 because they would have to excavate feet of sand, not inches, feet. And we can't go ahead with big plans. Right now, it's just little stuff. We're shoveling out as it comes. We're hiring people, doing what we can, but we can't do anything major until there's a fix on their end. So Michael Delaney came and spoke with me. He showed me his plan, and I was very encouraged by that. So that's, I'm hoping. But I would also like to request personally that section of silt screen be put back in place, because the water and sand have found a new path directly to me. So while they are trying to build a berm, and who knows, bringing in whatever materials they're going to use, if there's a rain in the interim, then it's coming right for me right now, because I have to go, if it's a rainy day, I have to shovel in between rainfalls. And that's just no way to live. My home can't be sold in the current condition it's in because you'd have to disclose what's happening. Nobody wants to walk into this. My neighbors and I have gone to the Central Appraisal District, and while property values are increasing, ours has decreased. So they have had to adjust our property value and, by $50,000. And so that is significant. So I'm hoping that we can all come to an agreement. We work together. The nursery is very nice. It's a good business to have there, but we've got to have some help as homeowners. And y'all have the pictures. I have them here, but I don't have to pass them around. I've had to dig a moat, a literal moat around my garage. It has to be shoveled out. It does catch the water and sand, but they have to be removed by the wheelbarrow full after each rain. One picture shows someone in front of my garage extending her arm because it's 7 feet to the ground. If you walk back to the back of the garage, you would bump your head. She's got like 2 inches clearance. I'm taller, and I think the sand, there's more sand now. So it's just everything. It shows the water outside on the patio. It shows it looks like a beach, but what's under that beach is a brick patio that I put in, but I've had to dig it out twice. So the pictures are worth more than I can say here, but that's everything unless you have any questions. That's it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, come on.
I'll make mine short. Cynthia German. On that drop, our houses are 20 to 25 feet below Appleby Sand. And that's per Steve Bartlett and some of those, the plans. It'll show that. And I'm like, Janet, my house has gone down $50,000 in the value of the property. I have a retaining wall that I have to replace. All my catch basins are full. I have a new sand hole that's cut between me and Catherine now, where I have a new sand deposit coming in. And it just continues. We can't do anything until something's done. And like we say, for them to stay there, that's great, but we want them to have a time frame to get on it and not wait till the rainy season and say it's rainy, we have to wait another year. We've been doing this since 2020. And so we'd just like to get them, something started. German.
Thank you. Is the owners of the property here? Would you like to speak, please?
Hello, council members. Charles Shugart, owner of Plant Shed. How are y'all? Since all this has changed some, we have secured the services of 215 Consulting. They've come in and done a fabulous job on re-engineering the footprint, which you saw through Elena's presentation. We're willing, able, and ready to move forward with that. That sounds like most everybody is at this point. We're just crossing the T's and dotting the I's. I have materials identified. All I have to do is call and get materials on order. Right now, the lead time on materials is about 30 days just for material. And then you're looking at about another 30 for construction if the materials don't lag. We all know kind of what situation we're in now with materials. So I have every intention to get it done a lot sooner than 6 months. My best estimate is 3, but I don't want to limit myself to that in case something happens with materials or our supply chain.
That's 3 months.
That is, pardon?
You said 3.
That's my goal, is to have it done in 3 months.
Okay, thank
Initially, with the Planning and Zoning Committee, we discussed 6 months, but I'm on a sooner timeline just like everybody else is. We have made some improvements. We're going to continue to make improvements, as noted on the special use permit, the modified special use permit. And so that's why we're here, to see if we can move forward.
Thank you.
And any technical questions, I'm going to probably defer that to Mr. Delaney. He's helped tremendously. The plan is somewhat detailed. There's some flow changes, there's some numbers that Mr. Delaney can discuss. There's measurable items on the flow chart, on where we measure the flow, the outfall of the drainage. But water rolls downhill. We're gonna try to alter as much as we can off of the impervious and semi-impervious areas. We're not gonna try, we are gonna alter the water from those areas over to East Austin, as was discussed by Elena. Yes, ma'am.
So I have just a couple of questions, and I'm glad you have measurable, as we talked about, some measurements to make sure we do, reduce the
Yes,
amount of
ma'am.
flow that is going, both the sand and the water. I'm just wondering, the silt screen, in the meantime, is that possible to do that?
I can, yes. That's a temporary silt screen. It was never intended to be permanent for construction purposes. Technically, we left it there to try to help, and it has, I feel like, as Ms. Fultz has indicated. I can add the 6 or 8 feet, I think, it's up near the beauty shop, up on the other end of the beauty shop. Yes, I can add that back. That's not a problem.
Just until all the other measures in
ma'am.
particular are.
Yes.
So I think that might help Ms. Fultz and
I
Ms.
don't have a
German.
problem with that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I haven't seen, I'm sorry, I haven't seen the measurements. I'd like to know how we can be sure, and it may be you, Mr. Delaney, but how we can be sure in 6 months from now, if, for example, it hasn't reduced the flow as we anticipated, what can be done. So I'd like to make sure we have some kind of something specific put into this so we can review the outcomes. So
And Mr. Delaney, more than welcome to come up and discuss more of the details on the flow, if you don't mind. And then that might help calm some of the nerves about the water volume in those areas, on what
it'll
it
help
was.
calm mine.
And on what it was and what it's gonna be. Thank you. I didn't know how to do that.
We did talk about this. I
Yes,
asked
ma'am.
very specifically for
Yes.
measurement, so, okay.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, I'll just step
Yes,
aside.
come on.
Thanks.
Michael Delaney with 215 Consulting. So with that, we ran through an analysis of the site for the existing conditions before anything was there, before the plant shed purchased the property. That was kind of our baseline. Let's start there and see what our flow rates would be. And then ran the same analysis with all the improvements in place, including the gravel areas, the new buildings, parking lots. And so what we discovered in that analysis is that with all the improvements in place, the discharge from their property would increase about 40%, in a given rainfall event. And so that we felt like was something that needed to be mitigated, for sure. And so with that, the system that we designed here in place would intercept all the runoff from the impervious and semi-impervious areas, the gravel areas, the improvements, and detain it upstream of the neighbors in Colonial Hills, and then throttle that discharge. So we're controlling the rate at which it can discharge from that upstream area. So it's just that there's a single small pipe that allows that to go downstream. Because again, we can't make all the water flow back uphill, so to speak. We're actually creating a berm that will pond water to allow it to divert to East Austin. And so that's what's allowing us to control the discharge, reduce the amount of volume that can go downhill in the future. So with the improvements, the net effect is we're gonna reduce the amount of runoff that goes there, even more so than what was existing. So we're going even further. And that was kind of the intent with this, is to allow this to, really try to make an impact downstream, because it's been an ongoing known issue in that area. And those are all highly erodible soils in that area. It's a sandy, silty material that is very much, as they have noted, problematic, to try to control and retain, so.
So this will reduce both the sand.
Right, by reducing the amount of runoff that discharges downstream, that's what's carrying the sediment with it, is the rate at which that runoff moves.
So I'm surprisingly a numbers person. So I would like to have some number put in here to flag that you know, some measurement that we can flag and check it in 6 months. And if it doesn't hit that number, to have it come back to us.
Okay.
To just, and I know it's one that you,
And
so
so-
you're gonna have to give me
Yeah.
the number, the
And so-
measurement.
So what we've done is there's a small discharge box, is what we call that, downstream of the burn. And we have sized that system to only allow 1.25 CFS, cubic feet per second, to discharge from that in any given event. And so that was just through the hydraulic calculations. And so we can check to see if it was installed to the elevations that we call for. And by the hydraulic principles, that's what we're controlling that rate of flow from. So-
Okay, so that's a process measurement. I
Right.
would like an outcome measurement in the people's properties or somewhere on the way down to make
Right.
sure that they are.
I'm not sure there's a real tangible way to do that on site.
Indicator or help
Well,
me
I
out.
would imagine the rate of complaints possibly could help, but.
So maybe if we have a rate of
But it's,
complaints, we'll rehear it?
yeah.
I'll look at that.
But,
I don't
I
wanna
say that in
rehear
jest,
it,
but the reality is only they're gonna be able to measure that outcome because they're seeing it day in, day out. As far as maybe being able to tell you how much sediment's discharging from there, I don't know if I have a way to measure that. I can tell you how I can put it back to existing conditions. But as far as moving forward and setting that baseline and have something measurable there. One thing that I guess as far as monitoring goes, if he can maintain a silt fence there in that vicinity, the rate at which that collects behind that silt fence is a measurable item. Or the box and the outfall box, the amount of sediment that collects around that. We could see, that would be as far as to answer your question in that regard, that's the only measurable item that I could try to tangibly think of at this point. But I understand where you're coming from, for sure.
I'm glad. Okay, I'll ponder.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
You stated that the water and the sand runoff is going to East Austin.
The overflow discharge will go to East Austin.
Is that
No.
going to bring any issues to East Austin Street?
We ran analysis on that East Austin as far as the capacity of that lane to convey the discharge, and we were confident we were okay there.
No buildup with sand?
No, not build up with sand. It's because of the way that's going to operate there, that water has to pond, and so its ability to carry sediment's gonna be minimized to nearly nothing. So it's kind of like a lake spillway. It's gotta build up to a certain point and then spill over that. So the velocities aren't gonna be such that allow that sediment to be transported. And it's all gonna be in the paved and roofed areas, so you're not gonna collect as much sediment in that area, so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Not for Michael, but for somebody else. I don't know if it's
Oh.
time to, I do have questions, but I don't know if we were gonna finish.
Is it
and-
for the staff or for the?
It's for,
Okay,
maybe both.
no, let's finish the public hearing first. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have-
Yes, is there anyone else would like to come in or ask questions? In that case, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll bring Miss Elena back up. You ready for questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. In the item report for this agenda item, I see where you wrote that since the initial request, the property owner has failed to respond in a timely manner, which resulted in 2 violation notices. And that the property owner had failed to rectify the violation, which has brought along this entire process. Could you, seems like he's responsive now. Could you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, so, again, the specific use permit was approved in May 2020. And then in May of 2021 is when we really started hearing from the neighbors about the additional drainage and sediment and what have you. So at that time, that's when we contacted the property owner, and had them bring their contractor back out to, make sure that the drainage was still functioning. And we had several meetings, phone calls, emails back and forth, explaining what was needed, what staff was looking for as far as documentation. And then once we verified that it was in non-compliance, we, again, met several times, came up with different ideas and solutions. And then essentially, when we stopped receiving responses, that's whenever we initiated the proceedings. And so it was over the course of several months and several attempts at contact whenever we finally decided to move forward and start the proceedings to amend the specific use permit. That's always the last resort. Staff doesn't like doing that. We try to work with property owners and applicants as much as we can to come up with solutions, but then when we don't have a response, we're kind of left with no choice. And then after that last violation letter, that's when we were updated and notified that 215 had been hired to assist them with coming up with a drainage plan.
So that's what triggered the response and recommunication.
Well, after we received the response about 215, we learned that they had engaged them previously. They just hadn't communicated that to us. And so staff, we don't know what we don't know. And so according to the applicant, they had engaged them prior to that, but they hadn't notified staff that they were going through that process.
Okay. I would be pretty upset if I was Ms. Volz and the neighbors. And I'm not sure that it's fair to put the onus on them to complain if it's not working. Given the lack of communication and the fact that we've gotten to this point also, I kind of think that that's another reason to put the onus on the property owner. I'm not sure exactly how to do that. I think that maybe one way would be to, you know, I hear that the neighbors say that they're fine with the business there and the plan looks good, and Mr. Delaney's explanation of the plan is helpful and certainly looks good. But I'm wondering if one way that we can do that is by shortening the build-out time from 6 months to something shorter, and then putting the onus on the property owner if he needs more time coming back. And I don't know if that would be in the form of an amendment or needing to come directly to council or just to P&Z or to you. It doesn't sit right with me that we're saying, okay, 6 months, then we'll see if it works, and then we'll wait if Ms. Volz has to spend another $10,000 in her backyard.
That's a great point, and the applicant did state that they intend on completing that, in a shorter time length, anywhere from 3 to 4 months, and so that could be a condition. The condition that Planning and Zoning Commission moved forward was 6 months, but again, that was in July. So I think the intent was 6 months from July. So it is within the purview of the council to shorten that timeline for construction.
That would be my preference, and then if for whatever reason, the property owner comes back and says, look, it took the materials 2 months to get here, or 3, some, reasonable explanation, then, but that puts the responsibility on him to come and request a longer period of time. I'm open to other suggestions on how to shift that dynamic. But it just, the way that it's laid out and just waiting to see if the neighbors complain and how much, it doesn't seem like a good solution to me.
Okay. So part of the condition for approval could be that the timeline for construction or completion of the improvements is 4 months to the date of this meeting. And then staff would go out and inspect and verify that those improvements were completed. And then if not, we could initiate the proceedings again to bring it back to council for review. So that would be a way to provide some assurances.
Are we able to build in some sort of mechanism by which you are kept up to date?
I'm not sure that could be something that's explicitly included in the language of the ordinance. I will say that staff is committed to maintaining contact and physically visiting the site to make sure that things are progressing forward as they're supposed to.
Yeah, I mean prior to the 4-month deadline.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Steve, did you have a comment? No?
No, I was just gonna say, when you get around to it, you need to make a motion with the specifics that you want. And I'm hearing a couple. And a requirement that they visit with staff isn't something that should be in an ordinance.
Okay. That's all for me, Mayor.
Thank you. Chad?
Yes, I have to turn on the mic. I guess my question's for Mr. Bartlett. This is,
Mayor Council, Steve Bartlett, City Engineer.
this is, I guess, more of a numbers question.
Sure.
I know that you have reviewed these plans and that they meet the requirements to get us back to the prior to any development. Can you just address that a little bit, just what your process is for the city and how we track compliance with these plans?
Sure. And understand drainage is physics and theory. So what Mr. Laney has done is applied real-world conditions and then applied hydraulics and physics to come out with an outcome. So what we do is review, in this particular case, the criteria, and Mr. Delaney and I met as he was developing these. So we spent about 3 hours or so kind of looking at his calculations. And the target that Michael had was to reduce it to equal or lower than prior development conditions, because getting better than that wasn't necessarily an obligation of the new development. So that was our criteria. So I went through, watched him for a given rainfall event, and we use a 25-year storm as our basis for all drainage ordinance items here. So using that basis, he calculated the runoff before they were there for a 25-year storm, calculated the runoff today after development, because he literally surveyed the whole property and flew it and knew every little square foot, and compared those numbers, then developed a system, if you will, a bucket big enough to contain that and not release it at a rate any greater than the undeveloped flow rate. So is there more water? There absolutely is more water. You're going to have more water. The difference is we hold it in a bucket and we release it at a rate so that downstream it doesn't know that we're releasing any more water faster. It happens over a longer duration. So that's the mechanics or the physics that are going on that Mr. Laney's done. And I reviewed all those calculations, certainly concur with it. And I don't know if that answered about half of your question, but.
No, that answers my question. I guess just a follow-up is, based on these plans, any future development he could then make as long as it came up to that pre-existing condition?
So, and Mr. Delaney may have to nod his head behind me, but I don't believe that these improvements were designed with a margin of expansion, or at least not very much. We all try to use a little bit of extra freeboard in what we do, but I don't think he's built it to double their square footage or area. So if they went through that, they would be going through a permitting process with us anyway, and that's a good opportunity for us to then show us an updated drainage model that, again, basically it's mitigating these increases. So it's important to understand, and we met during P&Z, Mrs. German and I talked, and some of the neighbors, and they had a drainage problem day one when there was just no development there. They had a significant drainage problem. They had a significant erosion problem. Some of those pictures that they talked about, there were pictures taken prior to development that showed that severe erosion. So what Mr. Delaney has done is mitigated the additional runoff. He has not necessarily mitigated all of the runoff, and that's important. He's actually tried to take a dent out of some extra just to do the best that they could. So, but there will still be runoff on the property. There's still the potential for some erosion outside this on those properties, and it's just important that you understand. We didn't turn the faucet off. We just took it back to previous development conditions.
Excellent, thank you.
In your opinion as an engineer, is this a long-term solution, or is there a time frame that they have to go back in and redo it?
So I think the design, which is made of pipes and inlets, and in some cases berms to do it, it is a long-term solution. Permanent's probably the wrong word, because everything takes maintenance. Those pipes can build silt up, and those berms also have to have maintenance. But can it exist forever? Yes, I think with daily and normal maintenance, it'll function the way Mr. Delaney's designed it for a 25-year storm.
Anybody else?
Yeah. So you actually have introduced my question. How much maintenance is there on the part of of the plant shed, Mr. Shugart, and I'm a little concerned that I make sure that the maintenance part is built in, or, some kinds of assurances, like, I don't know, you have to dig out the sand that's in the line, or do you have to get a plumber in there every once in a while to do?
Sure.
So,
Well, by virtue of the fact that he's basically using ponding systems, okay, like making little lakes when it rains, to hold this, takes that fast velocity that's making its way now down the hill, it literally stops that to zero almost, so it ponds it, and when that happens, the solids fall out. So even just in normal sediment control on any job, having ponding systems helps us keep that erosion out of the creeks and out of the streets. So by virtue of this design is ponds, it's made of ponds, I think it will capture it and that silt will fall out on his property. And then periodically, he may have to, pull some of that silt out. But it shouldn't get in the pipes very much, and it shouldn't certainly be breaching those berms.
so there is a maintenance,
There is a maintenance
Issue.
component to anything, yes,
To-
ma'am,
to-
absolutely.
and that's one of my concerns, and I know we talked about that a little bit. How do we assure when we can implement this system, but how can we assure that it effectively will stop the, additional damage down on Colonial Hills? So, and this may be a question for you, Ms. Helton, that's back to my outcomes measure,
Yeah, so part of the condition could be that the drainage improvements are maintained in a way that, to ensure that they function as designed.
Okay, so if we put that in there, and then if the landowners say, wait a minute, this isn't functioning as it was, then that brings them back to the table.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't want to put, too many, an undue burden, but we do need to put the burden of making sure that the drainage doesn't come down on the
Yeah, and I think it's very similar to several other of our development standards, screening, landscaping. You're required to install those with the development, but if something happens and it gets damaged, you have to replant, you have to replace, just like any of our other development codes. And so this would be something similar that we would apply.
So you're gonna have to give us some wording here, Ms. Helton.
Sure.
So, for this ordinance, because I would like to add, the silt screen that we, and maybe, Mr. Shugart, you might be able to help me. How should we put this into the ordinance that we actually have the silt screen, like, within a week? Is that possible? Okay, within a week. And then, so that'll help with the damage as it goes forward. Is that okay with you, Mr. Kirkland, to throw that in there, a little silt screen?
The conditions you're raising, the silk screen, Councilmember Fisher's 3 months.
4 months, you said, but.
Did you say 4?
I said 3, but Ms. Helton said 4, and
So you all will need to make a motion
Yeah.
as to which you prefer.
One.
Both of those are acceptable or okay as conditions here. The maintenance criteria or maintenance requirement, again, is acceptable as, is appropriate as a condition. You had mentioned some measurable criteria for performance. We don't have that.
So this last one, being maintained as designed, will help to kick it back if there's a problem, I think. I would love to hear, does that sound reasonable to the homeowners? So we're proposing 3 conditions here. One is to reduce the time to something that's doable. I don't know if it's 3 months or 4 months. Another is to make sure that silt screen is in place within a week. And then the third one is that the system will be maintained as designed. And so then if for some reason, you get a lot more discharge in your property, then you can come back and say it's not. We don't know why, but we assume. Right.
Councilmember, I think the language you're looking for is maintained to perform as designed.
That's much better. To perform as designed. Thank you so much, Mr. Kirkland. Sounds good. Does it, I think we're okay back in.
Okay, is anyone else? we have basically three options. Amend the SUP and accept new plan with planning and zone condition. We also amend the SUP with additional and alternate condition, or revoke the SUP altogether. Did I miss one, Ms. Alina?
No, those are all.
Okay,
all.
all right. So, is there a motion? You have one ready?
Unless you, okay.
No.
So I will make the motion that we accept, what is it now? The ordinance, that we amend the ordinance with, as written, with 3 additional factors: that a silt screen be installed within 10 days, a silt screen be installed within 10 days, that that we provide that the the improvements be made within 4 months, and that the equipment and the improvements be maintained to perform as designed. Sound good to everybody?
We have a motion.
Is that an okay motion? Do I need to, did I mess it up?
It would be neater if you accepted staff recommendation with the additional conditions that you listed.
Okay, so move. Can you write it?
So second.
Okay. We have a motion, and we have a second. All in favor for accepting, amend the supplement and accept with new plans with the planning and zone conditions, and also with additional and alternate condition per Councilmember Ballinger. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Motion passed.
I think, didn't we agree that Mr. Mize would pay for those?
I'm getting used to that seat.
Oh, yeah, all right. Well, you just carry on. Okay, we will move to 6B, consider a request for a specific use permit to operate a tattoo salon in a B2 general business district on lots 11J1 and 11J15 of the North Loop Business Park located at 5016 Justin Street. The request has been made by Krista Robertson, case number SUP 2022-04.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Elena Hilton, City Planner. As stated, the request is for a 200-square-foot tattoo salon located in an existing beauty parlor known as FX Salon on Justin Street. The applicant has proposed specific operating hours for this business, including operating between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday, and then they propose to be closed on Sunday and Monday. The property is zoned commercial, and again, is developed with a beauty salon that's been there for several years. Property to the north and south is also zoned commercial, including industrial property to the east. That includes some big box retailers. There's some office development to the north, and then at the end of the street, there's a single-family residential neighborhood. The applicant is proposing to be located in an existing tenant space that was included in a recent expansion of the beauty parlor. These are some images of the exterior and the interior. The tenant space will have its own exterior access, but will also share interior access with a beauty salon. These are some photos of the property from the street. You can see the building in the upper left-hand corner and the special FX sign. There is no additional freestanding signage proposed with this new specific use permit. These are some additional photos of the different uses in the area. The upper left-hand corner, you see some commercial properties to the north, and then in the lower right-hand corner, that's the entrance into that single-family subdivision that we just mentioned. These are some photos of some of the other commercial properties in the area, including Ashley Furniture located to the east along North Stallings, and then a restaurant located to the west. Just some additional character photos to give you an idea of the development pattern in the area. So again, the conditions for approval of a specific use permit are the same ones that we review whenever we're reviewing a request for a zone change. They include ensuring compatibility with adjacent properties, ensuring for orderly growth and development of adjacent property, and then ensuring that the development has adequate facilities, drives, landscaping, lighting, and doesn't create any nuisances, and again, it is compliant with the comprehensive plan. As part of this process, staff did notify 15 property owners within the 200-foot notification area. We also held a neighborhood meeting with property owners within 500 feet. So several of those came from the single-family neighborhood located at the end of the street, and they were generally supportive of the request with the condition of the operating hours as outlined in the staff report. This item was heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission on September 12th, where they did recommend approval of the specific use permit with the hours as outlined. And so this item is being brought forward to City Council, and the options are to approve the specific use permit as presented, approve it with additional or alternate conditions, or deny the specific use permit. And the applicant is in attendance if the council should have any questions. So with that, I'll conclude staff's presentations and open it up to questions from the council.
Any questions from the council before public comment?
No.
Okay, any public comment? All right, if there's no questions, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve agenda item B, 6B, I think it is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, 6B.
Okay, have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Now, that's how you get through an item. We're going to move to 6C. Consider an ordinance ratifying the property tax revenue increase in the 2022-2023 budget as a result of the city receiving more revenues from property taxes in the 2022-2023 budget than in previous fiscal year, and providing an effective date.
Well,
Ms.
Mayor, I
Kerbo.
think we're going to get through this one pretty fast, too.
Okay.
This is a additional action item that the legislature implemented a couple of years ago. Now, we have the adoption of the budget and the setting of the tax rate, but this is an additional item that basically, if we're raising more property taxes on the budget than we did in the prior year, then we have to ratify that there is a tax revenue increase for the city. This has to match the budget that was adopted last week. And so as the budget stands today, this ordinance says we have adopted a budget that has a increased tax revenue of $821,000. And so if when we get to the tax rate setting process later, it is a different rate than is stated here, then what we will do is we will do a budget amendment on next year's budget, as well as amending this ordinance. But as of right now, the budget has been adopted with this $820,000 revenue increase, and so we have to ratify that tax revenue increase first, and then if anything changes, we'll come back and amend that ordinance at a future date.
Got it. Any questions of Ms. Kerbo from the council? Any public comment? Okay, do I have a motion for C?
Make a motion, we approve item 6C.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we will move to D, receive an annual report from Keep Nacogdoches Beautiful, Community Services Director, and Ashley Villarreal.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Brian Bray, your Community Services Director. The item for you this evening is the annual report, which is required in the agreement between the city and Keep Nacogdoches Beautiful, or commonly referred to as K&B. And so Ms. Villarreal, with your permission, Mayor, will give a presentation to council, and then I'll return for the next item, which is consider approval of the agreement.
Certainly, thank you.
I will be quick as well. My name is Ashley Villarreal, and I am the Executive Director for Keep Nacogdoches Beautiful. So this is our mission here, is just to, provide volunteers for city events and then, educate the community on, environmental standpoints, recycling, beautification, all those types of things. This is our list of volunteer board of directors. These guys are great. I couldn't do a lot of things without them. You can see Brian Bray is there also. So this is the list of programs and events that we had in our 2021-2022 year, and I'll go through each one of them here. So our Tech Cycle Saturdays are probably a fan favorite of Nacogdoches. That is my number one question that I get from everybody is when is our next Tech Cycle? So we try to hold them quarterly. We usually have them across the street from the farmer's market. We have partnered with STS Electronics Recycling out of Jacksonville. It's the same people we've used for years and years and years. We fill up our trailer from the general public, and then I call them and they come and pick it up in a couple weeks, and then they part everything out, the wires and everything. Our Adopt a Highway is also a quarterly event. This is actually a Don't Mess with Texas campaign through TxDOT. We just do our part in it. So it's a 2-mile site located in between Highway 7 and Star. And our next one is actually this coming Saturday. We have a fall sweep every year. This is actually a requirement to be a Keep Texas Beautiful affiliate. Every year it's different. We host different service projects. Last November, we did a park cleanup at MLK Park, our Adopt a Highway, and then also our Tech Cycle collection. Our one for this year is also going to be in November. We're still working on the fine details on what that's going to be. This year we actually partnered with Texas Land Conservancy and did a cleanup of Bonita Creek at their Bonita Creek reservoir back there behind McDonald's where the cool waterfall is. We did the entrance there, the roadway, it was just covered with bush and everything, and so a lot of volunteers came out and clipped all that, and then of course we pulled trash out of the creek. That picture there on the left is actually my 12-year-old and one of our board members pulling a vacuum cleaner out of the creek. And then the picture on the right there with the Jeep is everything that we pulled out as far as trash goes. And then, so we participate in SFA's MLK Day of Service. This is their event that they host. We pretty much just give service projects to do, and then they give us the volunteers. And so we did a cleanup of MLK Park again, our Adopt a Highway, and also our Tech Cycle collection. For World Water Day, which is in March of every year, we gather volunteers and did a cleanup of Lenana Creek. And then one of our board members also give a brief presentation on water quality and the importance of it to all of our volunteers that were there before we actually did the cleanup itself. And then we participate in SFA's also big event, the same concept as MLK Day. We provide service projects, and then they provide us the volunteers. This past April, we did our Adopt a Highway and our Tech Cycle collection. We also participated in the Earth Day at Pecan Park, which is an event that the library actually puts on. And we did just a few things with children. We handed out Don't Mess with Texas coloring books. We did some take-home sunflower starters and some upcycled baby food jars that they could just take home and then replant them after they sprouted a little bit. And then we also played a litter pickup game with them. We hosted our second tire recycle day, and it was phenomenal. We raised enough money to be able to recycle 500 tires. We wanted to go, so the event was from 9 to 12. We actually had to shut down at 11:15 because we had already reached our maximum of the amount of money that we had raised, which is unfortunate, but we'll know next year to try to raise some more money for it. But Liberty Tire out of Beaumont came and collected the tires, and it's the same company that the city uses whenever they pick up tires out of creeks and out of the landfill and stuff like that. So yeah, this is just preventing people from dumping tires illegally everywhere. We also provide festival litter abatement at the Texas Blueberry Festival and then the Nine Flags Christmas Festival. And you guys can imagine how much trash we pick up during the Blueberry Festival. Yeah, that's fun. A long day, but it's fun. During the Christmas season, we did it from late November to early January. We hosted our first Christmas light recycle. So we had these receptacles set up at the lobby when you walk in at the Recreation Center, at the Fredonia Brewery, and the Chamber of Commerce, where people could just come in and drop off their old Christmas lights. If they went to go put Christmas lights up and they didn't work anymore, instead of throwing them away, they could bring them to us. And then STS Recycling, which is the same people that pick up our electronics, came and picked them up, and they'll use the wires and stuff to repurpose them to different things. So a few months ago, Holden Kelly came and talked to you guys about this fun thing that's happening, the Friends of the Forest Trail, which is a big partnered event between us and the library and the Recreation Center. It's going to be an interactive educational trails at 2 different walking trails within the city, and they're going to have QR codes where people can scan, and it'll bring up a little forest friend that'll talk about different things like beautification and litter abatement and just different things like that. We're hoping the grand opening for that is going to be on Texas Arbor Day, which is November 4th. We're hoping to have a bunch of kids come out and it be just kind of a big to-do. And that's it. So we thank you guys so much for your support. And any questions?
Thank you for your report. Any council, any questions?
Thank you. We do have a beautiful city. Thank you.
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to 6E. Consider approval of an agreement between the City of Nacogdoches and Keep Nacogdoches Beautiful for Essential Services, Community Service Director.
Yes, Mayor and Council, Brian Bragan, your Community Services Director. The agreement before you this evening calls for the city to collect and distribute to K&B all donations made to the city for K&B on our sanitation and water bills, and with an addition of $2,000 per month from city funds, which was budgeted in your budget, submitted to K&B. In exchange, K&B will provide necessary staff, volunteer support, and technical and educational expertise to further recycling programs and beautification within the city, and provide an annual report. So Mayor, if this contract is renewed, it will begin on October 1st of 2022 and end September 30th of 2023. And I'd be happy to answer any questions after public comment.
Okay. Any public comment about number 6E? Okay. Council, any questions or comments about continuing in this with Keep Nacogdoches Beautiful? All right. Do I have a motion for 6E?
Yeah, I make the motion that we approve the agreement between the City of Nacogdoches and Keep Nacogdoches Beautiful for essential services as proposed.
Have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Okay, we'll move to 6F. Consider approval of a contract by and between the City of Nacogdoches and McKinney and Moore of Texas LP for the 2022 SWTP Filter 9 Rehabilitation Project in a not-to-exceed amount of $291,906.16. Assistant Director of Public Works, Mr. Opperman.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Case Opperman, Assistant Director of Public Works. Asking you tonight to consider approval of a contract with McKinney and Moore for the Filter 9 project in the amount of $291,906.16. We received 3 bids on September 8th for this project. Duplachain Contractors out of Alto was actually the lowest submitted bid. However, there was a bid discrepancy that we discovered when we were tabulating the bids, which actually caused them to withdraw their bid. So the second low bid became McKinney and Moore of Texas LP out of Jacksonville. in the amount of $291,906 and change. And they have done this kind of work before, specifically for our consultant KSA engineers. And so we're confident that they can do this work. Main goal of this project is to rehab Filter 9 out at the surface water treatment plant. It's been down for a little while waiting repairs. We'll get new under drains and filter media. They'll be disinfected. And we're also going to replace pressure transmitters for filter effluent flow meters throughout the filter gallery. So filters 1 through 6 and then 8 through 10. Filter 7 is being done as part of the ongoing Filter 7 rehab that we've already awarded. So there is budget for this project, and we do recommend award to McKinney & Moore for this amount. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them after public comment.
Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, council, any questions or comments?
I guess the only question that I have would be related to the bid that was withdrawn. What was the discrepancy?
So when bids are submitted, there's a place on each bid item for a bid written in words and also in numbers. And so the bid specifies that words control when there's not a agreement between the written and the numerical. What they had done on the item, I believe for the filter media, was they wrote 18,000 and they numerically put 81,000. So they just transposed the 1 and the 8 there. What it would have meant is for their bid to be accepted, they would have had to honor the $18,000 price for that item instead of the $81,000, and that was a $63,000 hit that they just couldn't take. So they chose to withdraw their bid. So the second low bid then became the low bid.
So they actually would have been the low bidder. except
Either
for that.
way.
They would have been the low bidder, yes, sir. But they couldn't afford to eat 63 grand on that. So they were disappointed. They were. And they asked if there was any way we could do it, but our contract specifies that price cannot be considered as a bid discrepancy that we can waive. So, I should say a bid irregularity that we can waive. So they either had to hold to that price or take their bid out of it. So yeah, we were a little disappointed also.
Yeah.
Because Duplachain does do good work for us. So
But it also means we pay more, right?
unfortunately, but that's the way the bid law or the purchasing laws work. So
Is it legal to scrap the process? Oh, yeah, sorry. Is it legal to scrap the process and redo it? And 2, are there practical considerations that would make that not desirable?
yes, it is always legal to go back out for bids on a project. However, the reality is we're not going to get the same prices, and they will be higher because now everybody's played their cards, so everybody knows what everybody's numbers are. So we either won't get the same bidders or we'll get the same bidders at probably a higher number. And Mr. Kirkland may say it more professionally than that. So that is an option. That is an option.
Any other comments? Do I have a motion on 6F?
Make a motion to approve 6F as written.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Okay, move to 6G. Consider approval of resolution number 1312-09-22 to amend the term of a Chapter 380 Economic Development Program agreement by and between the City of Nacogdoches and JBSC Development LLC regarding the development of a residential subdivision. Ms. Philpott.
Mayor and Council, Larissa Philpott Brown, Economic Development Director. In March of 2021, 2022, just a few months ago, you approved a Chapter 380 agreement with JBSC, who is represented by Mr. Jake Crawford. He is here tonight. That agreement, just as a reminder, had a 5-year term, and it allowed for an $8,000 rebate of infrastructure costs for each lot that was developed. The rebate was to be paid at the time of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. Since March, Mr. Crawford's team's been working on financing and engineering and getting the project ready to go. And at this point, he has come back to us and requested just a slight amendment to that term. He has requested that the 5-year rebate period begin at the time of the application for his first building permit. He asked for that term begin when the first house construction begins, and we felt like we could tie that down to the building permit as a more definite date. And then also staff suggested that we add an additional time frame of 18 months to allow that to happen. So just for clarity, the March agreement terminated December 31st, 2027, and the agreement before you today says that the agreement shall terminate upon the earlier of 5 years after the application of the first building permit, or March 20th, 2029. And Mr. Crawford is here to answer any questions you might have, and I'd be happy to answer any as well after public comment.
Okay. Any public comment regarding this item? And I don't know, Mr. Crawford, did you care to speak to the item or just answer questions?
I'll answer any questions you need.
Great, thank you. Okay. Council, any questions or any comments? Okay.
No questions?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you for your consideration, Jay Crawford.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve item 6G?
I move that we approve item G as written.
I'll
Thank
second.
you. Have a second, all right. Any discussion? All right, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, we will move to item 6H, discussion and consideration of all matters incident and related to the issuance and sale of City of Nacogdoches, Texas Combination Tax and Revenue Certificates of Obligation, Series 2022, including the adoption of an ordinance authorizing the issuance of such certificates. Director of Finance.
I'm going to turn this over to our city secretary.
Okay.
Jan Vinson, City Secretary. We received a petition yesterday in my office, September the 19th at about 1:45 p.m. from Mr. Philip Blackburn. Presented it to me. I had a group of executive staff verify signatures on that petition to stop the certificate of occupancy obligation. And the petition only needed 717 signatures, and city staff verified over 1,000 names. So that petition will kind of halt this process.
All right. I think the only thing that I would add to that is we do have some drainage projects that we need to consider at a pretty soon time, and also some road projects and some other matters of health, life, and safety that relate to our fire stations. So we will be having some workshops to discuss those things. So everyone stay tuned, and we'll continue to work through these items in the coming weeks. All right, so we will actually pass on 6H, and we'll move to 6I, consider ordinance ratifying and setting a tax rate on all taxable property for tax year 2022 at a rate of 0.5848 per $100, valuation on all taxable property within the corporate limits of the City of Nacogdoches as of January 1, 2022. The said tax rate having a maintenance and operation component and a debt service component, and providing an effective date. Director of Finance.
I'm going to defer to the city attorney as to how we proceed with this one, because this one is the one we need to pass on and go to the next item. This is the tax rate with the CO in it.
Mayor, can you call the next item out of order?
Yes, I can.
Please do that.
Item 6J, consider ordinance ratifying and setting tax rate on all taxable property for tax year 2022 at a rate of 0.51851 per $100, valuation on all taxable property within the corporate limits of the City of Nacogdoches as of January 1, 2022. The said tax rate having a maintenance and operations component and a debt service component, and providing an effective date.
Alrighty, so, just as a reminder, our taxable assessed value this year was a little over $2.1 billion. It included $46 million in new property that was added to the tax roll this year. Our prior year tax rate was 61.6 cents per $100 valuation. Our calculated no new revenue tax rate was 55.479 cents per $100 valuation, and the calculated voter approval tax rate was 54.945 cents per $100 valuation. These are the new calculations with the exclusion of the CO issuance. Our proposed tax rate will be 51.851 cents per $100 valuation, which generates a little over $10.7 million in operating and maintenance monies and $228,000 in debt monies. This actually generates less revenue than last year's budget by about $577,000. That's due to the debt component that has paid off recently. But it does generate $734,000 in new M&O revenue, and of that, $270,000 came from the new value. So before you is the ordinance that will adopt a tax rate of 51.851. That is an error on the screen. It's 51.851 per $100.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public comment? Okay, council? Any questions or comments on 6J?
Mayor, I had a follow-up question and a couple of statements regarding your mention of the drainage project and other workshops. I don't know if now is the appropriate time to ask.
Ask away.
Okay. Since this item has to do with setting the tax rate that we had planned on, since we're not able to issue the COs, I just wanted to make a couple statements. Many constituents have told me that they were misinformed about what the COs were about and about the implications of signing the petition. And what's more disturbing than that is that some of those constituents told me that they heard that misinformation from people in positions of authority. Voting on whether to issue the COs wasn't the only way for the community to have a voice in this process. For months and months and months, city staff has been providing opportunities for community input. They've been practically begging for it. But I recognize and respect the result and implications of this petition. I wish it had been done with full transparency. But that's done now, and the people who are going to pay for it are the people who were standing back there in uniform, the people who put their lives on the line every day for this community, our firefighters. With that said, it's obvious that we have major, as you said, Mayor, health, safety, welfare, things that are of urgent importance and for us to address. And beyond that, I don't think we had allocated any money in the budget for drainage. It was all in the COs, is that right?
Yes, that's right. We do not have a funding mechanism currently for drainage.
$0.
$0.
Mr. Bartlett, could I ask you, sorry, if you could just kind of quickly summarize what position that would put us in for this year?
We've got about $2.1 or $2.2 million of already designed or near shovel-ready projects that we consider Tier 1 or critical projects. A lot of those are road crossings, in other words, not full bridges, but large culvert crossings where we're eroding. So some of those are going to have to receive attention in the very, very near future, whether Band-Aids or whether full replacements. But yeah, we'll certainly be looking for ways to fund those. Others of these are just flooding events that have the potential for damage and traffic, and to arrest traffic and do things like that. So I've got a whole variety of those issues, but a lot of these are critical in what we consider Tier 1 drainage. I have an additional group of projects, and I don't remember the count, I apologize, about $3.9 million that we still think are on the super important list, but we have not designed them yet and totally assessed the impacts. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Yes, it does. What I'm gathering is that we don't really have a choice to not address the drainage issues?
Correct, or at least the vast majority of them, I need to begin to come up with solutions, correct?
Okay, so then it'll be on council to figure out other funding mechanisms to kind of piecemeal.
Yes. and,
Together.
You know, I don't know exactly what our schedule is for going forward for other funding mechanisms, and so, but if we have to keep what we've got for several years, then it's not gonna be satisfactory. We'll have to find some other way to fix those. Yes, ma'am.
And we're set for a workshop tentatively?
You were thinking in the next month?
Specifically on drainage?
No, on staff's recommendation on moving forward with any of these
Sure.
necessary projects.
Was speaking to the fire chief last week. We would like to have a conversation with council at one of your meetings in October so we can start addressing some of those health, life, safety issues at the two stations, stations 2 and 5. Knowing that we were just doing some sort of what ifs if this comes to pass, what we need to do. So we were just trying to look at some scheduling and you have, since you don't meet on October the 4th because of National Night Out, we were looking at either doing the 11th or the 18th, and I think we're looking at the 18th of October to do that workshop on that discussion item.
Okay, my request would just be that we do it as soon as possible, because we need to figure something out.
On the other projects? Okay.
For the firefighters, the cancer mitigation, the raw sewage backing up.
Right, yeah, okay.
Thank you. Anything else?
No.
Anyone else?
I have just
Yes,
a
sir.
couple of things. I think, Mr. Kirkland, you may be able to answer this best for us. What are our options for the existing projects? How do we, so from the proposed CO projects, what are our funding mechanism options legally? So we can pay cash for those, right?
Correct.
So we could pay out of fund balance, and we could go and issue general obligation bonds through a bond election process, right?
You could do a bond election, which would be a year and a half or more down the road. So those are your two options. There's an intermediate step that I don't recommend called tax notes, but I don't recommend it, so it doesn't really advance your ball or move any of these projects forward in an effective way.
Thank you. Ms. Kerbo, what about fund balance?
So currently, the estimated fund balance at the ending of 22-23 with the proposed or the adopted budget now, is estimated to be about $2.4 million over our reserve. So it's excess of $2.4 million over the 25% that we have to maintain. And so that's the amount that we have available to spend on any of these projects. Now, historically, we have tried to keep that excess reserve right at $1 million over the 25%. I get a little nervous if it gets under that. We can definitely get under that. I just have nerves about it. So you're looking at between 1.4 and 2.4 to fund some of these items.
Excellent, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, anybody else?
So I guess just, go ahead.
No.
Just to follow up on the bond election process, you said it would be a year and a half before we could do that. Can you give me some details on why it would take us a year and a half to get to that point?
Bond elections are fairly complex endeavors. You essentially have to have all your projects lined up, cost out, and negotiated the rates with your bonding agencies before you order up the election.
Which has to be done 3 months in advance of the election.
Yeah.
So we would have to have everything lined out right now if we wanted to move forward by May, right? We would have to have everything in place.
If you wanted to put it on a May election, you needed to be ready to go, and you are not.
So our best hope is November 23.
Right, and that's optimistic. But it's doable, but it's very optimistic.
Thank you.
What kind of cost do you think we're looking at to do that?
For an election?
Yeah, for this process, is it costly or is it?
Well, I don't know the cost of doing an election here in Nacogdoches County.
Okay.
In Houston, we would automatically tag on $1 million to everything we had to vote on.
Really?
But we don't have that price here. It's
Yeah.
significantly less.
Okay.
So, Jan, do you know?
All in, my regular election usually runs around 3,500 to 4,000.
Okay, good.
Much different.
Okay.
So I guess my only other comment would be that we have to do these projects and that we need to do the study that's necessary to have an election ready at latest November. I think we need to move forward with that.
That'll be one of the things that, the mechanisms for doing this would be one of the things that would come to you in the workshop, is which path do you want us to go down? If you recall, and you may not recall, but the rest of council gave direction to staff at a similar meeting last fall to proceed with the COs. So that's now been derailed, so we have to retool and go to do a bond election.
I mean, that's our only realistic way of paying for these things, right?
Unless I win the lottery.
Can we get that in writing?
Oh, she's moving to the beach.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on.
I don't think we have a
Oh,
motion.
we don't have a
but I'm
motion?
ready.
No,
I'm
and
sorry, okay.
I had another question.
Oh, sorry, okay.
It was
Go ahead.
just a follow-up for Ms. Kerbo, and a follow-up of what Councilmember Huckabee was saying. We have $8 million in ARPA money
Yes.
too.
Yes.
And I know that staff had a rough plan of how you guys thought that we should spend that money. Is that something that we can also revisit at this workshop in October?
Absolutely. Actually, anything that is in the now adopted budget, anything can be reallocated as city council so pleases. So if there is something that takes priority over the water and sewer lines that were budgeted with the ARPA monies, then yes, of course, we can redo that. And pretty much anything that was included in that CO, those projects would qualify for the ARPA funds. So if we do need to shift some of that money around, that is absolutely within your rights to do so. It's just gonna take a budget amendment.
Along with, I'm assuming that the $3 million that we had put in the budget, taking from reserves, could also be.
All of those
Okay.
reserve purchases as well.
Thank you.
Okay, need to reprioritize. Okay, now can I have a motion on 6J?
I make the motion that we adopt item 6J as written.
All right, thank you. Have a second?
Second.
Second, thank you, sir. All right, any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. All right, do I need to do anything on 6I, or do we just pass it?
You can pass it.
Okay, all right. So we passed 6H and we passed on 6H and 6I. Okay, next number, item 7 is executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.072, deliberations regarding the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person. All right, so we are adjourned to executive session at 7:03. 551.072, we are returning from executive session at 7:52 and with no action to be taken, and so we're adjourned.